good evening and welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Anita Blanton in for Paris Schutz yet again. Let's get straight to what's happening in Westtown, where a construction project along Grand Avenue is causing quite the controversy. Less than an hour ago, in fact, residents and business owners held a press conference slamming Mayor Brandon Johnson for the city proposal to redesign Grand from Damon to Ogden. It would add curbside bike lanes with concrete barriers, but critics say they are concerned that these lanes would block emergency vehicles, slow down buses, and exacerbate the parking problem downtown, all of which they believe could hurt small businesses in the end. They said that their requests to meet with the mayor and aldermen have all repeatedly been denied. Now to some national headlines. The U.S. Senate just rejected a bill to halt the war against Iran and an early show of support for President Trump's campaign. The War Powers resolution failed 47-53, with Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman being the sole Democrat to side with Republicans. The measure would have limited any further attacks by requiring congressional approval, and that is after the Pentagon said more military assets are on the way to the Middle East this morning. Meanwhile, Secretary Pete Hegseth says that U.S. military action in Iran is, quote, just getting started as more bombers and fighters arrive today. He also confirmed an American submarine took out an Iranian vessel off the coast of Sri Lanka, killing 87 people.
It was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
A new CBS poll shows a majority of Americans aren't buying the White House's explanation for the U.S.'s role in the conflict, but Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said today that she believes President Trump has America's support for the operation. She also said that Spain will now cooperate after previously blocking the U.S. from using its military bases against Iran.
I think they heard the president's message yesterday loud and clear, and it's my understanding over the past several hours they've agreed to cooperate with the U.S. military, and so I know that the U.S. military is coordinating with their counterparts in Spain.
Well, earlier today, I spoke to Senator Tammy Duckworth on Chicago Live, and this was right after debate on the Senate floor about the War Powers resolution vote. She said that it would force the White House to prove to Congress that the strike was necessary and explain how Iran's long-term democracy will be protected.
What we want is for the White House to come and tell us how is it that they're meeting the criteria of the War Powers Act that basically says that you can't just launch an attack on a foreign nation and start a war without Congress's oversight. Now, let me be clear. I'm not shedding a tear for Khamenei, right? The Iranian people are better off without this authoritarian dictator in charge who has personally ordered the mass killings of tens of thousands of Iranians. But all we've done, this White House has done, is created a power vacuum that now is going to result in more other organized groups that tend to be terrorists or the IRCG in Iran coming back in, and that is not going to help the democracy movement in Iran whatsoever.
Well, obviously, the war in Iran will continue to be our big story, but we have not forgotten about the Epstein files. Just hours ago, the Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify about the DOJ's Epstein handling of that case. It comes as more Epstein files are said to be released after the Wall Street Journal identified over 47,000 files that appeared to be missing. It is believed that the documents could contain unverified sexual assault allegations against President Trump. The DOJ initially withheld them because officials said some files could, quote, contain untrue and sensationalist claims against President Trump. Well, back here at home, Chicago's first automated public restroom is coming to Wicker Park by the end of 2026 this year. The alderman behind the pilot plan is responding to some concerned neighbors now, questioning whether it would be safe, whether it would be sanitary. And the standalone bathroom will be installed at the Polish Triangle near the Division Blue Line station. So here's what we got from Alderman Laspada's office. It says in this statement, defending the proposal, claiming the policy's popularity is widespread among business owners, residents, and homelessness advocates. Reads in part, it is clear that we have a need for Chicago to be a more caring place. And one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure people are able to use the bathroom whenever they need to. Speaking of pilot projects, let's talk about another one. It's going to affect a lot of Chicagoans. Last week, the news that Waymo's self-driving cars have begun testing here made waves online. And now, State Senator Michael Hastings is introducing legislation to regulate these autonomous cars. He's joining me now to break down the bill. Thank you so much for being here.
Anita, I'm so happy I'm not sponsoring the autonomous bathroom bill. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and to join Fox. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, just a bit of a difference between what those two things would be. But Senator Hastings, this would evaluate how these self-driving cars can operate safely across many different counties. Is that right?
So look, yes, that's correct. But I'm a suburban dad, so I spend a lot of time driving my kids around Illinois, and I try to look at this practically. Technology is changing so quick, and autonomous vehicles are already operating in several states. I just think it's important that we have clear rules, strong safety standards, and oversight in place when it arrives.
You know, some people would say that Illinois is maybe moving too fast, trying to catch up to some of the other states that are already using these. Would you agree that maybe things have escalated pretty quickly, especially with people running out to go, get a sighting of them last week? But do you think that these guardrails will work in the end?
I think it's really a combination of both. On one hand, other states have already begun deploying autonomous vehicles, and I just don't think Illinois should be sitting on the sidelines while the future of transportation is being developed somewhere else. There's just a lot of economic opportunity tied to this technology, whether it's investment, innovation, and jobs. So we need to make sure this technology is introduced carefully and responsibly. It allows Illinois to catch up with innovation, but also put some common sense guardrails around how the technology is tested and evaluated.
And obviously, what works in one place may not work for another location. What would this bill change about how or when they're able to operate?
So what it does, it's a pilot program. So Chicago is certainly one of the places where this technology is likely to appear first, just because the size of the city and the complexity of the transportation system. Larger counties, typically have more infrastructure, more traffic diversity, and more oversight capacity. That makes them ideal environments for these testing of new transportation technology. So starting in large counties allows us to study it in a complex environment before expanding it more broadly across the state. Like I said before, though, it operates in other states and in other major cities. This is just an expansion of that and setting up the framework safely for this to be employed.
Now, when you mention safety, obviously some of the issues that these companies are running into in other states when it comes to autonomous vehicles would be what happens if they're involved in a crash? I mean, what happens if, especially in a place like Chicago with so many people driving about on the roads, what happens if there is an incident? Who would be legally responsible?
So that's some of the stuff we're actually going over right now in Springfield, is we have a lot of organizations, especially in the legal industry, the Trial Lawyers Association, other groups that provide driver services. Number one, we want to make sure this is safe. Number two, if something bad happens, how do you respond? Whether a car shuts down, a car is engaged in an accident. What I've found, especially going to California, seeing Arizona, these cars are very safe. And it's very few and far between that they get into an accident. It's just the news stories that kind of show you when something occurs and then there's some criticism. That's why we want to have a pilot program. We want to have the proper oversight so that people can actually respond when something does happen.
Yeah, and I know companies like Waymo believe that an autonomous vehicle could actually end up being safer than humans behind the wheel. But seeing that they are moving into the area, testing things out in the area, is that what kind of forced your hand here? Or were you already working on this after seeing it in other places and thinking, hey, at some point it's going to be here?
Look, so I represent the southwest suburbs of Chicago. We announced yesterday that we're going to go ahead and deploy drone delivery through our Amazon facilities. The technology's here. Our economy is evolving, and we either want to move with it or we do nothing. I'd much rather set place guardrails, especially through a pilot program to implement technologies like Waymo. But there's other autonomous vehicle car companies that are out there like Schutz. And these are nice vehicles. I think the platform is a Jaguar. People don't know that. Schutz is run by a company called Amazon. I think majority of the people know that across the state of Illinois. These things are safe. it also takes a lot of things off the road, like drunk drivers. It provides opportunities for folks, whether you're disabled or senior citizens, to get from point A to point B. And if it eases somebody's transportation stress and it makes things more safer, I think we should explore it in our state.
All right, we'll see where it goes from here. Please keep us updated.
Anita, I hope to see you soon. Thanks so much for covering this.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Coming up, everyone, we're talking about legislation to deal with the disposal of vapes in Illinois. Well, let's get to another bill making its way through Springfield right now. Two local high schoolers from Pontiac, Illinois, came up with a proposal in government class to require vape producers to manage the disposal of their products. To turn that idea into reality, they enlisted the help of Danny Robles from the Illinois Environmental Council. He is here to explain how mandating vape disposal will benefit the environment. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on tonight.
And I'm sure that some people are wondering, why are we addressing disposal of vapes and not getting teens to stop vaping? What would you say?
I mean, that's a good question. I think one of the harder parts is teens are still going to be encouraged to go out and get the products. I think what we're really looking at is how do we have a producer responsibility for these products. So although we wholeheartedly agree that we should be pushing for teens to get off vapes, we're also addressing that this is here now, and we have to also address the contaminants that come from vapes.
And then there's the question of how this issue of disposal ends up falling on the company and not the teens.
100%. And I think for us, what we're working here is the Vape Stewardship Act, which is a smart policy that keeps up pace with new products. As vaping grows, laws must evolve to address the emerging waste streams that cause long-term health and environmental degradation. And this would help require producers to develop a take-back program, which in fact mandates a recycling program that's managed by producers. And this producer responsibility makes sense. Companies that profit from vaping products should help manage their end-of-life impacts rather than shifting the burden to taxpayers or local governments to remediate, which is why we're excited for this bill.
So talk to me a little bit more about how you got connected with these students.
Yeah, Andrew and Allison, for us, are just an inspiration to behold. Having such young advocates think about this policy, develop it with their teacher, and really gives us a lot of hope. So we've worked very closely with their teacher, Paul Ritter, over the years to help develop these pieces. So he reached out to us at IEC, and we put them in connection with some of our partners that have done work like this, like the Product Stewardship Institute, and help really flesh out this policy with a lot of support with how other states have done this as well.
So when we're looking at this idea of vapes being used, especially by teens in our state, but adults as well, how great is the impact here that we're talking about, and how great is the environmental impact?
Yeah, the environmental impact is growing year after year. While I don't have like numbers of how many vapes are being disposed here, we know that once the cartridges are thrown away, they're creating millions of pieces that are hard to recycle waste year after year. And many of these devices include lithium batteries, heavy metals, and plastic components that can leach toxins into our soil and water if sent to landfills. And these have been linked to fires at recycling centers and transfer stations, really putting sanitation and recycling workers at risk across Illinois. And the current waste system isn't designed for vapes. Most curbside recycling programs can't safely process vape devices because of all the toxins and contaminants, which lead to fires and at the waste facilities. So this bill for us is about protecting workers and communities. A proper collection and recycling reduces the amount of fire risk and also helps prevent the toxic exposure that come into our communities.
We couldn't find any enforcement provisions in the bill. Let me know if they're there, but how do you plan to ensure that vape producers are actually following the rules if this were to go into effect?
That is a great question, and that's something that we're continuing to work with our agencies and our bill sponsor to continue developing the proper mechanisms for enforcement. So that is something that, although we have the idea of how to structure this, I think there's still more to come on how to properly manage this.
And in the conversations that you're having, are you finding that you think that they're going to have some bipartisan support on this?
I certainly hope so. I think although we have a lot of opposing views on opposite sides of the aisle in many aspects of government, I do think that smart policies that are proposed by students usually come together to support these long-term policies that are practical. So I know Andrew and Allison are doing everything they can to talk to both sides of the aisle and gain that support.
I think it's a wonderful idea for teens to be involved in the civic process, but are you anticipating more pushback on this? And how would you talk people through some of that pushback?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any bill that is changing a lot of dynamics with current status quo, there is going to be initial pushback. But that's something that we've worked very extensively with the Illinois Environmental Council in having those stakeholder conversations with those potential advocates who might be opposed to this and figure out what is a proper solution forward. So we're really eager to be working on this with retailers and merchants over the next few months to figure out what is the proper next steps that we can take to ensure that we have a recycling program that alleviates our concerns and also keeps them happy.
Quickly before I let you go, any other environmental legislation you're working on right now?
Oh yes, we every year we work anywhere from 30 to 40 bills on our own, and also keep eyes on all the other policies across the state. So we're really eager to move forward with wetlands protections, making sure that we're reducing plastics within our communities, and also advocating for stronger energy protections for our communities as well.
Okay, well, great speaking with you this evening. Thank you so much for making time for us.
I really appreciate it and hope you all have a good night.
Same to you. Everyone, we are going over the state's most endangered buildings after the break. Welcome back. Every year, Preservation Chicago releases its annual Most Endangered Buildings list. And these are historically or culturally significant sites at risk of demolition or neglect. Well, tonight, the executive director, Ward Miller, is here to explain how his list compels the city to take some action. Great having you here.
Thank you so much, Anita. Wonderful to be here.
Start with maybe a few buildings that made the list.
Just a few?
I know we can't get to all of them.
All right. Well, we have 7 of them, but our number 1 is the Chicago Stock Exchange Trading Room and McKinlock Court, which are 2 spaces at the Art Institute of Chicago. And the Trading Room was moved from a building by Adler and Sullivan that used to be at 30 North LaSalle, and it's reunited the preservation movement in Chicago and across the nation. And so the Art Institute wants to replace this iconic space that was removed from the Chicago Stock Exchange building and relocated to the Art Institute in 1977, and they now want to consider replacing that space with a new gallery, a new building. And we think they could put it in the railroad trench, you know, that separates the 2 wings of the Art Institute, rather than demolish these buildings. And we want to see this room, this iconic room that is our poster child, along with McKinlock Court and other structures within the Art Institute, landmarked.
Now, there's one that has to deal with the Pope.
Oh, yes, you're on to us. So, yes, St. Mary's, otherwise known as St. Mary the Assumption Church, is in the Riverdale community of Chicago versus the suburb of Riverdale. So right at the city's south border, and this is the church and school where Pope Leo spent his most formative years. And in 2011, the Archdiocese closed it, merged the church, and it's been vacant and had several owners since. So we really think that this building deserves international recognition. After all, this is the first American Pope ever in history, and he's a Chicago boy. He's a Chicago kid, right? And we love that. So we want to celebrate the site. The school and the church are in terrible disrepair. So we really need investors and people to step up. This is a way of highlighting that.
Yeah, so it definitely needs the funds, but otherwise the renewed interest has got to be there.
It's got to be there.
Yeah, all right. So what is the process that you all go through when you identify these, and then what happens? Once you produce the list, what happens?
Sure. So we produced the list. Today we had 570 audience members, both online and in person, and this goes out to a lot of city officials. The media covers it, and we also suggest these for landmark designation. And what oftentimes happens is we have a good preservation outcome. So sometimes a landmark, which is really amazing. And these are things that give pride to neighborhoods. They're cornerstones of the neighborhood. This area of Riverdale has been suffering from disinvestment for 50 years, and this is the opportunity to really inject that neighborhood with a lot of excitement, right? Yeah. And we hope when Pope Leo comes to Chicago that he won't see this embarrassment of a church and school that's been allowed to be vacant for a long time, but to really celebrate this in his hometown.
Now, do you see that there are different buildings on the list each time you issue this report, or are there some frequent flyers?
We have some that continue on, like the Century and Consumers buildings on State Street that the GSA, the General Services Administration, had a $52 million earmark to demolish, and we got them landmarked a few years ago. St. Adalbert's Church in the Pilsen community is another one where we could fill the city council chambers with people of Polish and Latinx descent. And then one of my favorites too is the Thompson Center, which is now going to be Google's Midwest headquarters. And that had the opportunity to be another Block 37 for 20 or 30 years. So we really try to build community, work with our partners. It takes a village to do this, and we're honored. And another one that I think your viewers would be interested in is the Chicago River Bridges and Tender Houses, the Bridge Tender Houses. And these are iconic to Chicago on the main canal of the Chicago River in the North and South Branch. But unfortunately, they're not getting the attention, the maintenance they need. And if you look at them closely, they're really falling into disrepair. So hoping CDOT and IDOT are listening.
You want to say it again?
Yes. CDOT, IDOT, are you listening? Because these really need the attention of those organizations. And we also want to see these landmarked.
Are there any, I mean, most of what you said seems like, okay, this makes sense. But are there any that shocked you or would shock people at home?
I think a lot of these would shock people at home. I think, the idea that the Art Institute of Chicago would destroy a beautiful space that they highlighted in books and publications for the last 50 years, and now suddenly it seems like it's not appreciated. I think there are better alternatives, and people are shocked that that garden where everybody eats and you'd hear jazz concerts and whatnot could go away, which is a reprieve from, looking at art and reading a lot of labels. I mean, I personally and my family love to spend a little time out there because you're overwhelmed with the extent of the collections and the exhibitions. So it's really sad that we are even talking about this. But we hope for good outcomes. And the same with a lot of the churches that are on our list continuously. And we have a synagogue this year, the Loop Synagogue in the heart of the Loop, which is suffering through some hard times, but a 1957 building that's really remarkable. And so we really, we're really excited to share these with the world.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us. I mean, I can see how passionate you are. You've brought me plenty of different things to take home so I can read up on it as well.
Thank you.
So I appreciate it. What makes you so passionate about all of this?
You know what? My family's been in Chicago for more than 100 years. I'm fourth generation.
Wow.
They hail from all sides of town, and so do I. It's more than a job. It's a passion. And it's the idea that we can make this a better city, and we can do this through landmark designations and through honoring these historic histories. We were also very much behind the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House being landmarked, which will now be 2 museums. We were very much behind the church where his funeral was held at 40th and State, Roberts Temple. And I want you to know that that is one of 3 national park sites now, along with 2 sites in Mississippi. So we do some tremendous work, and we do it all pro bono. So we're supported by individuals and foundations that like what we do.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. We